Well, look, thanks for joining John and myself as we launch our document. It's our updated economic recovery strategy for the North. And in doing so, we're setting forward our vision for a fair recovery for workers, for families, for businesses, and for young people. We launched our previous document in June of last year at a point in time where restrictions were beginning to be relaxed and where we were hopefully looking forward to a recovery phase. And unfortunately, as we all know, the predicted second phase of the pandemic hit hard, probably harder than a lot of people thought. And strict restrictions were reimposed, and that has had a resultant very difficult impact on society in general, on workers and on businesses. We know that people are really struggling with restrictions at the minute, and we all want to see society reopen as quickly as is safely possible. We now have the vaccine that is being rolled out really well here in the North, but we also know there are some unknowns in terms of things like new variants coming in. So we need to move forward very carefully in the weeks and months ahead. Over 100,000 people in the North are still on furlough. We know the pandemic has had a really particular impact on certain sectors of society, on young people, on women, on our BAME communities. We know that more than 20,000 additional young people are not in employment than at the same time last year. So these are all challenges that we face in the immediate future. Since we launched our document last June, Brexit has also become a reality, and so businesses that were already struggling with the impact of COVID now have the additional burden of Brexit to deal with as well. So that's the context in which we're launching this updated recovery strategy. Our strategy is based on 4 principles: supporting workers and families, supporting businesses to create jobs and to sustain employment, delivering on a fair and just transition to a sustainable economy, and giving the executive the tools to aid recovery. Our vision for recovery is that ordinary people must not be the ones that have to pay the price for the current crisis. So we will be resisting any attempts from the Tories, from the Tory government, to place the burden for this crisis on the backs of ordinary hardworking people. We want to support businesses to sustain existing jobs and to create new jobs, and in particular small businesses. And we believe a dedicated strategy is needed to support our young people in the time ahead, to provide them with employment, education and training opportunities that they need. And it's also our objective to maximise our economic potential as part of the European single market and the all-Ireland economy. So John and myself are going to talk through our principles for recovery, and we're going to set out how we believe young people need to be supported as part of the recovery, and also how businesses should be supported in the new trading realities. So I'm going to hand over to John to talk to the first one of those principles, and then we're going to have a wee bit of discussion around this.
Kiva, and as Kiva has said, that families, workers and young people have to be at the centre of any economic recovery. We've seen in our streets in recent times what happens when young people and marginalised communities are left behind. So in the future, the economy has to represent and uplift all communities moving forward. For far too long, communities in certain areas have been left behind and haven't seen the benefits of any economic recovery plans. Sinn Féin wants to change that. So we are committed to delivering on a recovery for workers and families and young people. We recognise the essential part workers play in any economy, and we want to ensure that workers' rights are protected and the commitments in the new decade, new approach are upheld in regards to workers' rights. We will be bringing forward a private members bill to ban zero-hour contracts and ensure that work-life balance is upheld in law and protected. All workers should also be able to request flexible working time. This is especially important for women in the workplace. We want to see support for access to reskilling. As our society has changed so dramatically over this last year as a result of COVID, the changes in working practices has to be reflected in allowing our workforce to be upskilled. And we want to ensure that there's support for childcare to allow everyone who can and wishes to return to the workplace. Over to you, Keelan.
Yeah, thanks, John. And as you says, we are really focused as part of the recovery on young people. We are calling for a specific strategy to support young people. We want to see the establishment of a youth guarantee so that every young person aged 16 to 24 has the opportunity to access education, training, or employment opportunities. We also want to see the widening of access to apprenticeship programs. There has been an public sector apprenticeships too, and we want to see the upper age limit of 24, which is currently in place, removed so that everybody can have the opportunity to avail of apprenticeship programs if they want to, because we know coming out of the pandemic, once the furlough scheme ends, we know that there are going to be a lot more people unemployed, a lot of people who will be looking for opportunities to reskill and to upskill. And we know that young people have been particularly impacted and are more likely to be furloughed. So we want to make sure that there are opportunities there for young people. We also want to remove the barriers to education in general. So we want to make sure that everybody who wants to have the opportunity to access education, whether it be through college or through university, has the opportunity to do so. And one of the things that we want to ensure is that young people who are coming from a care experience background have the opportunity to access university if that's what they want to do. We also know that our students have been really badly impacted this year. And there are challenges facing students in general in terms of the amount of financial support that they get. But in particular, postgraduate students really struggle because there is no financial support in place for them other than access to a limited loan. So we want to see that addressed so that those young people who want to do postgraduate degrees can do that also. As part of New Decade, New Approach, there are commitments to ending age discrimination. So we want to see a bill to end discrimination on the basis of age brought through the Assembly also. What we're really happy about was last week, Conor Murphy announced funding for the Job Start scheme. So that will now be brought forward by Minister Deirdre Hargey, and that will support employers to provide paid employment opportunities for young people, and it will also include support for young people with disabilities. So that's a really important step forward in terms of the type of support that we want to see available to young people, and we want to see that support extended out so that all young people have the opportunities that they need to progress. So John, if I hand over to you for the next one.
Thank you, Kiva. And moving on to supporting businesses to create and sustain well-paid, meaningful jobs. The Sinn Féin Economic Recovery document sets out how we would develop an industrial strategy that supports sectors hardest hit, such as tourism and hospitality. Support businesses to reopen in a safe manner and ensure that they're supported in the economic recovery required. And also support jobs of the future. Our economy is dramatically changing all the time, so businesses need to be supported through investment to help create those jobs of the future. And legislate for social value and support for different business models, such as cooperatives and social enterprises that benefit local communities. This in particular, I think, would play a huge difference to inner city communities and rural communities who can, through their community structures and organisations, can create and sustain jobs in their community, and by doing so, create wealth within their own community for the benefit of their own community. So moving over to you, Kiva.
Yeah, and that's, I suppose, John, something that we have discussed even through the Economy Committee and in recent times as well, is the role that Invest NI can play in terms of supporting local businesses and particular small businesses. And that's something that we want to see extended out in terms of the remit of Invest NI. And also, you mentioned there the rural communities, and we see a lot of potential in the move by Conor Murphy in terms of putting in place hubs across the north for the civil service. We'd like to see that extended out into the private sector as well. So that's something that we would like to see Invest NI and some of the other economic agencies in the north look at on a more coordinated basis to ensure that people can take the benefit of the new working arrangements that many of us have had to adopt in recent times, that those, you know, local communities can see the benefit of having people working in local communities, that local shops and local cafes will have the benefit of people working more locally. So that's something that we think should be extended and built upon as well. But I suppose just to move on to how we see that businesses should be supported to respond to what I guess we could call is the new trading realities that have resulted post-Brexit. I think it's really important that collectively the executive helps businesses build on the protections that the protocol have provided. The protocol obviously is not something that any of us wanted to see. It's a mitigation against the worst impact of Brexit, but it does provide very necessary protections for the all-island economy and for North-South cooperations, and it gives us here in the North a unique opportunity and a unique ability to sell goods into the EU single market and also to sell goods into the British market. And that's something that we believe the executive needs to develop a strategy for its agencies overseas, so that they are promoting that very unique arrangements that we have to bring the opportunities and to build on the opportunities that there is there for investment and for job creation. And John, you will be aware of this because we've had some conversations with the likes of Invest NI and others around this, but we know that a lot of businesses since the beginning of January have begun to look at their supply chains as a result of Brexit, and some of them have begun to reorientate supply chains across the island of Ireland and into the EU. And we believe that the business need to be supported in terms of doing that Intertrade Ireland and Invest NI and the other economic agencies must be properly resourced to ensure that businesses can be supported in terms of developing their supply chains and strengthening the all-island economy to create new jobs and to bring investment across the island as well. And we also know that under the protocol, the sale of goods is protected, but that services isn't included in the protocol, and that is something that may over time create barriers for businesses. So we want to, in the first instance, look at the recognition of qualifications to ensure that there is mutual recognition of qualifications across Ireland and Britain, so that businesses can operate smoothly on an all-Ireland basis. So that's something that we think the executive needs to be working with the Irish government, with the British government and the European Commission to secure. So if I hand back to you, John.
Thank you, Kiva. And the last point I'll cover in this presentation on economic recovery is a just transition to a sustainable economy. Green New Deal was a new decade, new approach commitment. And that is a vitally important commitment as it helps tackle climate change, a huge area of concern for our entire society and the planet. And not only will the Green New Deal help lower carbon emissions, but it also creates jobs. And through creating jobs, you create prosperity for local people. So a huge opportunity there for the creation of jobs and the reduction of carbon emissions. We need also to see increased investment to support digital and green industries. This needs to be a focus of Invest NI. And again, Kiva has been talking about our engagement with Invest NI. We have been pushing them to look for new opportunities, either through the protocol or through the opportunities we have to create employment and prosperity for our people by tackling global warming. We have an opportunity to harness the potential of our natural resources across the island to renewable capacity. Indeed, I'm bringing a bill through the Assembly in relation to renewable generation of electricity. At the heart of that is the generation of electricity by local communities, by farmers, by local businesses, or by individual citizens. And again, it brings wealth back into the community rather than being lost outside the community. We want to establish a just transition commission to plan for the decarbonisation of our society, with all those who will be impacted to ensure a partnership approach. particularly important to ensure buy-in from our rural communities and the farming sector. We are bringing forward a bill to ban fracking as part of our move away from our reliance on fossil fuels, and also to extend remote working opportunities for as many people as possible. There's some people who it will suit, there's other people it won't suit, but we have to look at the potential of this. And Kiva earlier on mentioned Conor Murphy's move to allow civil servants to work closer to home, which is beneficial for the civil servants, their family life, but also reduces the number of journeys being taken and reduces our carbon footprint as well. So within our document, there's huge opportunities to create jobs, to create prosperity and support workers and families. Over to you, Kiva.
Yep, and I suppose the final thing that is included as our principles is giving the executive the tools to aid recovery. So we know that we are very limited here in the North in terms of our ability to fund things because we're reliant on a block grant. So basically we're reliant on the whim of a Tory chancellor in London as to how much money they give to us here in the North to run our departments, our public services. And in terms of the economic recovery, what has been put forward so far is nowhere near enough to deliver the type of recovery that we need, not just to mitigate the impact that COVID has had, but also to break down the decades of underinvestment that we have seen more generally, but particularly over the last decade, the impact that we have seen on our public services by Tory austerity that has basically really limited the ability of public services and our ability even to respond to this pandemic was limited by the impact that austerity had on our public services. So Conor Murphy has recently established a fiscal commission to look at the devolution of fiscal powers. And the devolution of fiscal powers would enable the executive to plan its own spending and its own revenue raising to adequately fund public services and to direct resources to where they need to go. And I think there needs to be a really public conversation at this point in time about the type of public services that we want and need and how we fund those public services. And that is why the Fiscal Commission is important. We believe that at this point in time, we need to see a stimulus-led recovery. So we need to see borrowing to invest in the type of things that we have discussed here today, in the job creation, in skills, in the Green New Deal, and in renewable resources, in promoting our digital economy and our creative economy and our green economy. All of those things are going to cost money, but at this point in time, we need to be able to invest in those things to generate the type of recovery that we want and need. And we believe, therefore, that the executive should have increased borrowing powers to be able to do that. And I think that this is part of a broader conversation about the model of economic growth that we have seen promoted over the past number of decades. It has been about endless consumption to generate growth. And that is part of what has driven the climate and biodiversity crisis that we have seen as well. So what we need to see now is a move away from that type of economic growth model towards a more sustainable economic development that is more equally spread across society, so that everybody is benefiting from the recovery as we move forward. So that, I suppose, is our economic recovery strategy in a quick run through. Over the next number of months, we will be laying out some of the aspects of the recovery strategy in more detail, and we'll be working with our executive team to put it into action. And we'll be looking obviously towards the Assembly election next year to, in terms of coming back after the Assembly election, to be able to deliver a fair recovery for workers, for businesses, and for young people. So thanks again for joining us this evening. And we will be putting out the document across our social media platforms as well.